Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Hacking Exposed. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us today. Today's title of the webinar is on obfuscation and weaponization. We're going to talk about two different topics today. And joining me, I should say, I have two distinguished speakers coming in. One is a regular on our webinars and the true kind of inventor of Hacking Exposed, Stuart McClure.
Hello, everybody.
Awesome. And Stuart is attending from, I believe, Pacific time zone today.
Yep, Southern California. Finally out from under the blanket of rain that we've been having the last couple weeks.
That's good. You guys need that.
Yeah.
Second, we have Jim Walter, who is one of our security researchers and a truly scary gentleman. Jim?
Hello, hello. Greetings. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. And you're in Central time zone.
That is correct. A little bit north of Dallas, so I'm a Texas person.
Awesome. And I'm Brian Robison, Chief Evangelist here at Cylance, and I'm actually attending from Mountain time zone today out of my home office. And so represented by 3 different time zones here in the US. But really appreciate both Stuart and Jim stepping on today to help us out and look at some pretty cool stuff and have some great discussions. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. First of all, Stuart, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing at RSA.
Yeah, sure. So super excited every year. We love to go do the RSA talk, and it's sort of the highlight of the year for us with Hacking Exposed and with Cylance. And so we actually have 2 sessions this year. If you're making your way to RSA early, you can see the first one, just a short 30-minute talking about fileless attacks and how you can combat them. But the bigger sort of premier talk that we do is called Hacking Exposed Live. And this year we're talking about how to bypass next-gen solutions. So if you have an EDR solution or a next-gen AV solution and you're sort of keen to understand how the bad guys would try to get around these technologies, we've covered a little bit last year with adversarial AI, which is a big part of potentially bypassing next gen, but also real simply, you can just bypass it with age-old Hacking Exposed techniques. So we're going to show you that and do live demonstrations there. So hopefully you can make it to either one or both.
Yep, I think it'll be fun for both you and I, Stu, to do those. And I really hope to see a lot of you there and maybe meet a lot of you guys in person.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of fun.
All right, so our agenda today, Jim is going to step in and talk about obfuscation, and he's going to go through some of the methods and tools and techniques that can be used that are available now. You would be surprised at how easy this is now compared to the old school ways of having to do these types of things manually.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, when I first started Hacking Exposed and wrote it back in 1997, 98, 99, I mean, all of these techniques were still around, but you had to do them all manually. And you had to take, ASCII calculators to convert them to, octets to binary and you name it, split up in variables. And so now the tools out there today can actually do that all automatically for you. And so Jim's going to walk you through that. And that really sets up really perfectly what Brian's going to talk about with regards to taking that obfuscated code, the malicious code that you want to run on the target system, and then weaponize it, put it into something that'll actually get delivered to the user, clicked on opened and run. And so the combination of the two, the team just does a great job of not just sort of identifying the different capabilities of these tools and techniques, but then putting it all together to show you in real live format how it all works. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
We can jump right into, why is this a thing? Why do the bad guys need to obfuscate their code? And it's pretty straightforward, right? So, their main goals are the bypassing of controls. So your endpoint AV product that is looking for certain byte sequences or certain strings within files, your NIPS products that are trying to scan into file data on the wire, and that sort of thing. These methods allow the authors or the malicious actors to bypass those controls, get through, adjust the content of their malware to the point where it can go undetected and therefore be successful with regards to whatever they're trying to do. Also, anti-analysis, right? So the bad guys are completely aware that there's another side to the world, that there are people that are actively trying to stop them, like ourselves. And whenever we get samples or whenever we have to understand an attack or a campaign or respond to an incident, it behooves them to make the code as hard to understand as possible. And so the more they can obfuscate it and the more they can layer that obfuscation through multiple methods and transformations, the better off they're going to be from an evasion and an anti-analysis standpoint. Social engineering is easy. Putting this code into emailed documents or spreadsheets, Office files, PDFs, etc. It still works. We all know that the number one delivery vector is still spam, phishing, spear phishing attacks. People are still clicking on these items. The attack chain is still working, and so it's completely viable. And so as controls improve to try to detect some of these things, they're constantly updating their methodology to move forward. And this is stuff that is not just hourly, but minute by minute. We see Emotet is a great example where they update their during their primary spam runs. They update their document templates every 10 minutes, and sometimes those updates are focused on changing the method by which they obfuscate the macro code. So, this is something that the bad guys are keenly aware of, they're using, and it's analogous to running an executable binary, an executable piece of malware through something like a cryptor or a packer, something that changes the appearance of that file just enough to where it is not detected or does not look like what it really is, or it is difficult to identify what it is doing. And so same thing, similar approach here, analogy-wise, and it works. We see this day in, day out.
Yep. On the weaponization side, some of the techniques that I'll be showing when I talk about weaponization here in a little bit is, again, to Jim's point, it works. These techniques are working every single day and bypassing our controls that we have in place, and they're bypassing even the users. And that's, it's really how this stuff gets into our networks.
Yep, absolutely. And as Stu was mentioning, if you go back several years, there was a time when you had to do these things manually, but now it's become so easy to, there are so many tools and options available for the bad guys to use to make this stuff instant, automated, scriptable, especially with the introduction of PowerShell, where there's no reason not to obfuscate because it's so quick and easy. And we'll walk you through some examples of that. But I do also want to touch on obfuscation doesn't necessarily mean doesn't necessarily always refer to a transformation on code or macros or individual scripting strings. It could also mean changing where that code is located. So, if you have a Office document that's behaving in a dodgy manner, and as analysts that deal with this every day, okay, first we're going to look at the macros and see if there's nothing in there, if the code is actually hidden somewhere else in the document or buried within some feature of the application that is accessing the document, then it's that much more difficult to identify what's happening. And a great example of that is some of the DDE payloads that we're seeing recently, the dynamic data exchange, right? So with specialized fields, you can actually execute code and make it very difficult to identify where exactly that code exists and what exactly it's doing, especially if you pair a DDE payload with some of these obfuscation methods, then it gets even more hairy. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. The obfuscation can be a transform on stuff, or it can be complete of the code. Here on the screen, you see a couple real world examples. We've got a sort of a standard example up at the top. While this isn't completely obfuscated, it has undergone some transformations with regards to random casing and some splitting up and addition of special characters. So that's something that you see from time to time, but it's still more or less human readable. You can tell, well, that's downloading something and executing something, and maybe I don't want that to occur. But if you look at the two examples in the middle there, I believe the one is the macro from a recent Emotet sample, and the one on the right is from a recent campaign out of the Middle East that we were working on. It's much more difficult to tell what's going on. In fact, you can't unless you know how they are transforming that code, how they're obfuscating it, and then understand how to decode or decrypt that information to get to what they're actually doing. Same thing with the command at the very bottom. That's actually a command that that interacts with our demo environment that we'll be showing you today. Again, it's downloading and executing something, but it's not immediately apparent when you just look at that code. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen, and we'll kind of walk through some of this stuff. All right. So if we go to here and just kind of give you a little bit of details on the environment, I've got my sort of victim and working machine here running the PowerShell. And then I've got a Trevor C2 environment over here on the left. But for now, we'll focus on it over here. And again, Stu mentioned earlier having to do back in the day, having to manually convert stuff to hex or do other transformations. In this example that you see here is a very, very simple example of base64 encoding a string. If you go back a few years, this was a majority of what we would see. Base64 was pretty prevalent, before people started to find easier and more scalable ways to do some of these more complex operations. But just to kind of quickly walk through it, we have this string that we want to base64 encode, and we could do that in PowerShell with just a few lines. Here you'll see that we've got our string. We have the desired result, which is a conversion to a base64 string. And if I actually let this run, you'll see that string down here in the bottom. So that is the base64 encoded version of download the bad thing from evil.com. Now, if you see that in a macro, if you're familiar with base64 encoding, it's pretty quick to decode and figure out what's going on. But if you're not, or if you don't notice that that's what's happening, then it's going to just buy the attacker that much more time. This is a very basic example. We do still see this very, very often. However, we are more often than not seeing these much more complex operations. On the good guy side, I think we're all pretty familiar with tools like Metasploit and Empire, which allow you to do various obfuscation steps and generate documents for testing or red teaming purposes. There are also tools that are readily available that the bad guys enjoy. Things like MacroPack or Word Doc Builder, various kits and sort of turnkey utilities that make this process very easy for them. Just like we see in the ransomware world, these days you don't have to be a super skilled coder to generate really, really complex layered obfuscation code within your document-based payloads. There's all kinds of toys and tools out there that can be used. And I'm going to show you one of those now, which is called Invoke Obfuscation, which is a PowerShell-based tool. Again, very common in the good guy red team pen test world, but also very commonly used in the bad guy world because of what it can do. And even if they're not using this specific tool, they're using the methods that are available within it. This just has a really nice way to present it all and put it all together in a nice package. And it's great for this call because we can kind of walk through it and see exactly what's going on. And then in the end, we'll end up with a working C2 connection between this system and the Trevor C2 in the background there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to that. So what we're going to do here, again in PowerShell, is we're just going to open up the invoke obfuscation tool. Give a little more room here. And there we go. So this is a really powerful tool, and I'll show you a quick test here real quick. And so this allows you to perform transformative operations, be it encoding or byte reordering or various substitutions or various encryption on different parts of the PowerShell command or string. And you have all sorts of really neat options on how you want to do that. The starting point is with the command you want to run. But for demo purposes, before we do that, I just want to do a very simple test. So I'm going to set our command, or in this context, it's known as a script block, to this is a test. So we see here, and it's, there's lots of colors here going on, but successfully set the script block. This is a test. So we'll pretend that that's our command. Now, the menu here, you see you could do operations on PowerShell command tokens, entire strings. You can do various encoding operations. You can compress to a standard one-liner, and then you have some launcher options. So to kind of make it really visible in what's going on, we're going to start with some simple, with a simple string operation, and then we'll do another more complex operation. So if I go into string, you'll see I have several other options. So I can take this is a test quote command, and I can sort of break apart the text or the string itself and do some concatenation operations to spread it out and make it less readable. I can do other types of reordering, or I can reverse it. So we're going to do the reversal because that's a little bit fun to look at. So if and you can layer these. You don't have to just choose one and be done. If I wanted to, I could do all three, and then I could go and do every other option in there and end up with a really hideous pile of code. But for now, we'll just stick with the reversal, and it's that immediate. So you can see the result right here, and it's a little bit difficult to exactly tell what's going on, but essentially what they're doing is they're splitting apart the string. They're putting the text in reverse order, and then they're assigning variables to certain parts of it, and then they are using a join to put it all together the right way and read it from right to left. So we've got the reverse array information here, and then if you look right here, you see the broken apart. This is a test. So, if you didn't know this might just look like gibberish unless you knew from the get-go that you were looking for this as a test. But if you just look at this without any context, that's not necessarily apparent. But, again, staring at this long enough, you will see this and go, okay, it's reversed. Now I know what's going on. I can figure it out if I just remove some of the miscellaneous characters and put everything in the right order. But we can get more complex than that. So I can keep this code reversed. And then we recently did a blog on some interesting obfuscation that we saw in the field with regards to using secure string. So that would be found in the encoding section. And what this is basically it is AES encrypting the string. It's a built-in Windows function that's meant to protect sensitive or confidential string data within files, but you can also use it in this context to obfuscate your code and end up with something that is still runnable on target machines. So again, right now we're starting with this reversed reverse command here, but then I'm going to encrypt it as a secure string, and then we'll see where we end up with there. And again, like I said, I could do all these if I wanted to, and really get layered, but for now, we're just going to choose secure string. And again, just to point to what Stu was saying earlier, we also have the old binary and hex and ASCII conversions too. But so here is our AES encrypted, basically ciphertext. And in no way does this resemble the original command. You cannot, as a human being, read this and understand what's happening. You can see this. Okay, well, they've encrypted this with secure string, but unless you have a way to decrypt that, you are not going to have any luck deciphering what's happening here. So this is a text command reversed and then encrypted with secure string. So that kind of gives you an idea of just how easy it is. This only took us a few seconds to do some pretty complex transformative operations on this code to end up with something that is not recognizable, but still completely executable. So now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with our command that will download the Trevor C2 client and then establish communication and drop us to a shell on Trevor C2. So I'm going to start off by just sort of resetting here. And then I'm going to set my script block to the valid command. And to make life a little bit easier, I've got it saved over here that I can cut and paste. So just as we did before, we're going to set our script block, but this time to that command. There we go. So you look at this command. This is what we put in. Very easy to tell what's going on. No obfuscation whatsoever. This is clearly going to a web server, the web server, and downloading this Trevor C2 client and then executing it. We want to make that unrecognizable. So we'll go through the same process that we did before. We'll reverse it, and then we will encrypt it with secure string. So here we go. We've already got our reversed string. And again, this is because of the way that it also splits it, inserts miscellaneous characters that it will later concatenate. It's much more difficult to tell. Even just with the reversal of a complex command, it's more difficult to tell what's going on. You'd have to really spend some time piecing it together. And the longer the command or the higher quantity of commands, the less feasible that is in the real world of responding to an incident. So we've got it reversed, and now we're going to go back and encode that with secure string. So I'll go ahead, just as we did before, choose option number 5, and there we are. So we've got our conversion to secure string, that we can tell, but outside of that, all we have is this big giant ciphertext block that no longer in any way resembles our original command that was friendly and readable. So if I wanted to run this now and establish the C2 connection, again, this tool makes it pretty easy to do that. I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard and then paste it into a PowerShell session. Big, huge command, typically not something that would look runnable. However, it is. So we've got our connection received. And you can also see in the web server here that it downloaded the file. But more important is we've established the connection up here. So I'm going to quickly drop to the shell and interact with it. And now I've got a shell on that machine. And just to show that that's occurring, we will just try to run calc. There we are. So without even running a standard sort of executable piece of malware or binary, just with this layered and encrypted obfuscated command, we've been able to achieve remote control and code execution. Again, no quote executable RAM necessarily, but we've been able to get a full connection to our C2 from this point. So and again, this the tools and methods outlined here go much deeper and go into much more layers. But now that we've seen this, I think what we'll do is have Brian walk you guys through actually weaponizing some documents with similar methods and showing how this would look on the attack side.
Hey, before Brian jumps in, I wanted to ask this question earlier, Jim. I forgot to do it, which is, as an analyst, when you'll see a new sample, with a lot of this obfuscated code inside of it, are there some simple tools that will reverse the obfuscation, or layer by layer at least, to sort of, other than, in the old school days, like if I was an analyst back in the day, I would simply look for certain key indicators for, like, let's say the encryption, right? Or like, base 64 always ended with an equals, sign or something like that. I can't remember, right? And so you look for these telltale signs. Is there anything that automatically does that today? Sort of reverses?
There's a variety of open source tools. We can dig up a list of those if needed, but there are tools out there that attempt to sort of detect how things are encrypted, or how things are transformed. If it's Zor, it'll attempt to find the key and tell you how to decrypt it. So there's definitely stuff out there. It just kind of, you almost have to sort of take it on a however, more often than not, if you have the luxury of being able to detonate the malware, it's sometimes faster to, maybe detonate it and monitor it in a safe analysis environment and see, okay, well, yeah, I run this and I don't see the code, but I can see the outbound traffic. I can see the artifacts that come down. So, sometimes, depending on the situation, you just kind of have to go at it from the other side. But there are tools that help with the analysis and deobfuscation if need be.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and speaking of questions, and surely our webinar master here probably is slapping me in the head virtually right now, but I did forget to mention at the beginning of the webinar that we do want this to be interactive. So if you do have questions for us, there's a Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen, or somewhere else inside the Zoom tool that you can use to ask us questions. And we do have some dedicated time for that, hopefully at the very end. Or Jim and Stu are both online and can see those and may be able to answer those as we go. So I did forget to mention that. Sorry, Shirley, I owe you a drink next time I see you. All right. So now let's go ahead and start taking a look at a few things where we can put this into action. And some of the things that I'm going to do here are what we've seen from a lot of threat actors out there. APT32 is one. We've also seen it over the past couple of years with other threat actors like the Necker's botnet and other things like that have occurred, where we see different DDE strings being used and commands, and also some very interesting weaponization. I think today, what you're going to see is pretty cool example of a weaponization that we're going to do after we kind of reverse engineered how it was originally kind of created. So obviously when you see weaponized documents, this is kind of very common types of things that you're going to see. You're going to try, it's going to try to fool your user into clicking and bypassing some of these security warnings. And these security warnings are great, but they're also very easily ignored by somebody who is really trying to get to whatever that end content is. And also, the vendors, have begun to basically pass the buck to the end user. The end user is now in charge of whether or not they are clicking on things that are potentially dangerous. And so, most untrained users don't know that some of these things are quite dangerous or can be dangerous. And they simply click on them because they need to get to whatever is in that document. So there's a lot of elements here of social engineering. And there's also maybe a little bit of passing the buck to the end user and saying, well, it's not a product problem here. It's the user that clicked on it. So I like to show those kind of things as well. All right, so let's just go ahead and flip over to the hands-on portion. And very similar to what Jim set up here, on the left side of my screen here, I've got my Trevor C2 environment ready, because our goal today is to create a weaponized document that allows me to gain command and control of my remote victim. And today what we're going to do is we're actually going to use our resume here. And Stu, don't worry about this. This is not my real resume. I'm not hunting for a job. So you don't need to worry about that. But we are going to use our resume document. And now the resume document starts out because with this security warning, because it does have a macro in it. Now, this macro is actually a legitimate macro. So there are business reasons to have legitimate macros running in your environment. So it's not something that a lot of companies can just simply blacklist and turn off macros across the entire environment. They may stop legitimate business activity. Now, the macro that's running in this document has nothing to do with security, but it is a legit thing. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. And what it does is it just simply updates my name and my initials in the header of this file. And that's a great use of a macro. In fact, you can actually see this macro here. And it basically is a thing that's going to just basically update that field when you open up the document. So it's a really simple, innocuous macro, but it could be a legitimate thing as well. Now, the first part of this is not really about obfuscation. It's more about a technique that uses, as Jim mentioned earlier, the dynamic data execution component feature of Microsoft software that allows you to actually pull in data from other files or servers or whatever else you want. And we can actually exploit that. Now, the interesting thing in here is not going to be the command that I'm going to issue that is going to be, going to download the Trevor client just like what Jim did. The interesting thing here is going to actually be the how we're going to almost obfuscate the error message. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a field, and we're going to put it right down here at the end of this sentence. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I can actually change this and just delete and have just this exclamation point sitting here. And it kind of remains, oh, I think I deleted too much of it. Did I? No, I didn't. Okay, so it's still there. So there's actually a hidden field here, and I'm kind of hiding it behind the exclamation point. And if we enter the field code, we can actually see the actual code that it is going to be attempting to run. Now, to tell Microsoft to execute DDE, we simply enter DDE auto, which also tells it that it's going to execute this immediately when the document opens. Now I got to move a couple of windows around here. Hang on a second. Okay. So we have, like Jim did, I've got my commands kind of sitting here ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in the first command. We're going to grab this first command and put it right in here. Now, as you can see, what it's going to do, it's pretty obvious. I'm not going to obfuscate this right now because I just want you to see what's happening. It's going to download the Trevor client from the little Trevor server over here, and it's going to execute it, and we're going to get a reverse shell. Now, I'm going to close and save this. And again, I'm not showing really about obfuscation right now. What I'm actually really going to talk about is how this error message comes up. So this time, instead of getting the yellow bar at the top of the screen, which is relatively easy to train a user on, you're going to get this kind of odd message here that doesn't say anything really about security, but it talks about, the document links may refer to other files. So, maybe a user would say yes or no, but if we say yes, the next error message we get is it talks about the remote data. And it shows, K PowerShell exe. That doesn't look very nice, and nor does it want us starting the application of command exe. That looks pretty dodgy to the user. Now, the interesting thing is we can actually modify this Microsoft Word error message by changing the code slightly and not actually making any real change to the affected result. So I'm going to hit no on this and clear out all of that. And going to come in here, and we're going to grab our secondary command that we have. And we're going to toggle that field code, if I can grab that little guy. And we're just going to paste in and replace this with a different command. Now the command, again, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to grab that Trevor client and download it. But also what it's going to do is it's going to put in some weird text. And you can see here this path to MS Word is not really a valid path. And then there's this weird thing at the end called blah. Now, blah is something I put in here basically to remind me to change this text. And we can change it to something like is allowed by AV. We'll just put something like that. Now, again, the reason I'm not obfuscating this is I want you to actually see how this command works. I could now take this and obfuscate this, but the real value of seeing this is what it does to the actual error message. So again, we get the same error message as before, generic thing that this document contains links to other files. But if we hit yes, now we have this error message that says the remote data is allowed by AV. It doesn't quite make grammatical sense. We can continue to tweak with it. But you can see here that I've actually, with this code, modified the error message that's coming from Microsoft Word. So as a normal user, this is a message coming from Microsoft Word. This is not coming from a script or another program. This is a legit error dialog box that with the code, we can actually adjust to, again, target the user specifically and say, hey, this is safe. Go ahead and hit yes. You want to do this. And if we continued with this and we hit yes, it would go ahead and download the code and execute it. But we're going to not do that at this point. We're going to kind of continue on with something else. But I really like that one, and Stu, you like that one, I know too, because it doesn't obfuscate the command, but it actually kind of obfuscates the error message and makes it something that a user might really want to kind of click on.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's exactly what we would be using if we were trying to gain access in and take advantage of users. I mean, any kind of customizability like that is just key to get the user to click and to be able to not see it as malicious or potentially bad.
Yeah, I love it just because it looks like it's modifying like an out-of-the-box Microsoft error dialog that you could really just take advantage of.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on. What we're going to do now is I showed you that very simple macro that's in here that we had in this before. What we're going to actually do is we're going to replace this macro with one that I kind of built based upon several different factors. This actually came through, some of this is part of APT 32. There's some of this that I kind of rewrote to make it just work a little bit better. But basically, I have here a macro that's going to run. It's part of the auto open, so it's going to run when we start the program. And as Jim said earlier, what we're doing here, if you look down here a little bit further, when we execute things, we're not actually executing those nasty commands like Jim showed earlier. We are executing just these commands for code. So the VB script itself doesn't have the actual real bad command in it. Now, where are we putting those commands, or where are we getting those? The interesting thing is here is that we're actually going to get these from different fields within the document. So if you look at the document properties, the comments field is going to contain the Mac version of the command, and the company field is going to contain the PC version of the command that we're going to execute. So we're then going to grab that command and we're going to run it through a base64 decoding method, and then we're simply going to execute that string that comes out. Now, VB script doesn't have a built-in method for doing base64 command. So here's a piece of code down here that actually does do the actual base64 decoding of the string. And I'm going to show this to you here live. The first thing that we want to do, though, is we actually need to go create those commands. So we're going to close this, and let's build the PC one version first that we're going to hide in the company. Now, this string looks almost identical to the one that Jim was using earlier, and I'm going to use a little bit of a different tool to obfuscate this. I'm using a tool called CyberChef, and this is cool. It's an available tool on GitHub. You can download a local version of it, and it has all kinds of different ways to encrypt, encode, and you can go to and from, and it's pretty easy. Makes life nice and simple. All I need to do is simply cut and paste my command in here, and if I want to go to base64, I simply drag and drop the to base64 piece, and whack, all of a sudden now I have this nice base64 command that is in here. And so what we're going to do now is we'll just copy it to the clipboard. We'll come back to our document, and in the document we need to go into the properties, show all properties, and in the company field we're going to paste that base64 code. All right, Now we're going to do the same thing on to create the Mac version. Now the Mac version is going to run in Python, so we actually have to do a couple of different things. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to need to take our Python code that I have pre-written, and again, you can see it's doing the exact same thing. It's just downloading the Python client for Trevor C2. So we're going to take that code, and we're going to take it back over to CyberChef. Now, Python is kind of interesting in that we actually kind of have to protect the Python code and the formatting of it itself. So we're actually going to do kind of two different base 64 conversions. So the first one that we're going to do is going to actually take this code block and convert it to a base 64 string. Now we're going to take this little wrapper piece of code that is basically a Python command to execute and decode a base 64 string. So we're going to take this and we're going to put this into CyberChef. And again, here's my blah string. So we're going to come back over to this tab. We're going to grab our base 64 encoded, oops, shoot. I think I toasted it. Stand by, let me clear this out.
Yeah, I'll dance for you. Yeah, when you hit that refresh instead of the copy. Yep. Yeah,
so we're going to put that to base 64. Now we'll grab the copy of this, and we're just going to put that right into the blah here, right between those two tick marks. And so now we have a Python command that's going to decode and execute this base 64 encoded block. And so now we're going to convert that whole thing into base 64. And now we've got this other bigger block down here that is base 64. We'll put that in the clipboard. And we'll come back to our document and we're going to paste that one into the comments field. And that's really all we have to do for that. Okay, now I want to come back to the VB script because this is where we're actually going to step through this script and we're going to look at it and I'm going to show you what it's going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to step into this in debug mode. And I want you to look down here. I know it's a little small, but basically this variable called found value. And as we step through the document, as we step through the code, it's already found basically that we must be a PC. So we're going to step right down here and it's going to say, okay, the found value, go get that from the company field. And you're going to see this get pulled in. So there is the string that we pasted into the company field of the document. Now it's going to want to execute and make it go through the base 64. Now I'm just going to run through this a few times. I'm just going to run this loop a few times by hand, and then I'll stop. All right, so as it goes through each 4-character sequence here, it starts to decode the command, and you can see that being stored here in this variable called sout. So instead of running this by hand, another 245 times, we're just going to come down here to this, and we're going to put a breakpoint, and we're going to let the script run as fast as the computer will let it run, and you'll now see that it ran through that loop another 245 times, and we get the full command being dropped right out in the base 64. Okay, so now we're going to step through it again, and we're going to bring that command back up and put it in here, which is going to execute for Windows. We'll step one more time down into here, and now we're going to run that command with shell right out of the VB script. And if we hit execute now, we actually should see very quickly here, it attached to the Trevor C2, it downloaded the client, and then it executed that client, and we actually have command and control over that Windows 10 victim. So
nice.
We have actual working VB code. What we're going to do now, we're going to close this, we're going to take this document, and we're going to save it as our new resume out to the desktop. And so we've got established our C2 here. We can do interact session 1, and we can do just like what Jim did earlier. Oh, no, I can't run calc on this one. Windows 10 doesn't have calc. Let's do something like disk management MSC just to show Yep, there's your disk manager MSC that,
There you
executed
go.
from remote. So we've got
Yep.
command and control over the Windows box. All right, now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how this works cross-platform. We're going to flip over here to my mail client, and I'm actually just going to send this file to myself. Right, we're going to create a message here that's going to be, highly social engineered, and we're just going to simply attach our new resume document and send it over. All right, so that's as easy it is really to weaponize a document and send it on out. You can see it appear here. However, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to flip over to something a little bit more fun. So I've got a macOS box here, and I'm just going to show you kind of how this works. So I'm already signed into my email, and so we'll just pick our new resume file. We'll download that bad boy right out here. Here he is. And we get our, traditional enable macro warning on the Mac. We hit enable macros. Up pops our document. And it takes a few more seconds on the Mac for the Python code to run. But yep, we saw the Python client this time be downloaded, not the PS1. And we received a reverse connection from our Mac. And so back up.
Yeah, so Brian, what you're saying is Macs are hackable?
Well,
I didn't think that was possible. I thought Macs were, completely secure. Oh well, I'll learn.
Interact with the Mac now, and you can do something here. Now you're on the standard, Mac OS command shell, so you can enter, traditional, Unix commands or whatever you want to do here. Now, one thing interesting that I did is, okay, let's say we want to do something a little nefarious here now that we have command and control. Let me just slide this out of the way just a fuzz. I need to grab. So between the morning session today for Hacking Exposed and this afternoon, I tinkered with, and I looked up and I figured out how to build this little AppleScript command. It's a command. It's kind of analogous to like a PowerShell one-liner, but it's basically it's a way to execute an AppleScript command with one single line of code, and I can just grab and paste that bad boy right here. And what should happen on the client side is a pretty common type of error message that you see pop up on Macs all the time, where, hey, you need to re-enter and revalidate your iTunes password. So, oh, okay, I don't know why, but it's asking me for my password.
Love this.
Right, and I can enter my iTunes password here, and I hit login. And now the interesting thing is over here on the Trevor Command and Control, it actually sends me back the clear text version of what was typed into that field. So, very quickly you can weaponize a document and use it to essentially fish for account credentials, or I can now use this Mac to pretty much do anything I want, including making it a Trojan horse in my network and using it to attach to PCs all around it, all kinds of good stuff like that.
Yeah, you could use it as a pivot point into the entire organization as well.
Exactly, and so that, oops, I forgot the slide, but that's our kind of one more thing is, hey, everybody has seen, days worth of videos on how to weaponize documents and attack PCs, but the reason I really like this one about the APT32 actor is they specifically targeted Macs in some of their stuff, and I had to do a little bit of work to actually make it work. And obviously, you saw Office 2011 versus some of the newer versions, but they're these are attacks that are happening even up till right now. They're very active in the market even today out there attacking. So,
right. Yeah, that's great, and it all worked, which you never know with these live demos. So appreciate it, Brian.
Live demos do go awry sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, they do. So how can the folks on the phone and the webinar sort of defend against these attacks?
Well, I think, the obvious one to me is that we need to just kind of continually educating our users. And I don't know if we could ever stop this from happening, but the idea is you stop clicking on stuff, right? Whether Microsoft says it's good or Microsoft says it's bad, or even potentially bad, you saw how easy it was for us to even change the Microsoft message from a trusted product. We could actually modify that message to, continually, beat on the user to say, nah, it's okay, ignore the warnings, it's all okay. And then Jim, one of your topics or one of your thoughts was, kind of restricting access to some of these very powerful tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, through group policies and similar, you can get to a pretty granular level with how you how much you allow the users or the hosts to execute within the context of PowerShell. You can not let them run scripts. You can let them run certain kinds of scripts. So there is some control you have over that through the execution policy on the boxes. So it's definitely worth exploring that. Even someone who's local admin on the box, for example, doesn't necessarily have to have rights to execute unrestricted PowerShell. So you can whittle that down if you need to.
That's a great point. And then the last bullet we have here is utilizing technology that isn't fooled by simple obfuscation or even complex obfuscation, layered obfuscation. Rely on some technology that is available out there to actually defend against these things. And shameless plug here, if you do want to learn kind of about a tool that does actually defend against things like this, you can come check out the companion piece to today's webinar, which is the Cylance versus Obfuscation and Weaponization. We're hosting it on February 2nd in multiple time zones. And so if you just go to cylance.com/webinars, you can register for that webinar as well. We'd love to see you. Again, we do actually made it through today. We actually have a few minutes for question and answers. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and enter those into the Q&A field. And we can work on addressing those. Unfortunately, for some reason, I can't actually see that. I think it's popping up on my other screen.
I've got the Q&A and I've got the chat up. There is just one, which is, will the presentation be available for offline viewing? I did answer that as well in chat, but basically the answer is yes. If you've registered for the webinar, you can download it afterwards. Hopefully it's something you guys can kind of go back to over and over again and sort of watch how Brian and Jim did a lot of these techniques and how easy they really are, and just get really comfortable with it so that you can duplicate it as well. And we do recommend, by the way, all of these techniques, please run them in your sort of, stable of attacks against the solutions that you feel are, that are in place in your organizations or that you're considering to choose, because these are what the bad guys are using all the time. And rather than rely on sort of third-party independent testing houses, which are unfortunately not as independent as we'd love, I think it really is, the power's in your hands. You have the ability to do all these tests, run these all by yourself, see for yourself, test for yourself. And so we really encourage you to do all of that. All right, so let's see a couple of things in the chat window here. In your experience, have you seen tools that audit when users click on enable content on Word docs throughout the company? Yeah, that's a good question. Like, is there like maybe a GPO policy tracker or something that you can say, if a user is enabling macros or enabling content, can you get an alert? I don't know of anything. Jim or Brian, do you guys know?
I haven't seen anything in GPO. I know you can disable and you can enable, but as far as, I know in PowerShell there's quite a bit of auditing capabilities in there, but the problem with auditing is it's after something bad has already happened. It's great to know that your house burned down, but why did it burn down?
Right, exactly. It'd be more for just auditing purposes to maybe go after and help train users a little bit, but I don't know of anything. But if we come across something, we'll definitely feed it out and talk about it the next one. All right, we got another one. Can we assume script control would contain this behavior? That's the first part. I mean, we don't want to steal all the thunder of the talk in a couple weeks.
Agreed. I would
yeah.
say come back in a couple of weeks and you will see,
Yeah.
Cylance versus these things. And we were going to look at a lot of different elements of the product that can defend.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second part of that question is anything else in optics, could it detect about the technical parts of it? So I think same answer to the next question, which is just, hey, try and come in the next couple weeks and we'll see. Sometimes our solution is perfect, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we're not perfect. So it'd be great. You guys can come back and take a look and see how we do against all these attacks, because we'll do the same ones against us and our technology. All right. Is there any chance to see more rules in optics to contain related behavior that Protect could not contain? We are adding rules by the week. If you have not gotten on our early adopter program, let us know. We're happy to get you on, so you'll see all of the new stuff, the experimental stuff, and you can play with it as well. But remember too that optics is just another feature set within Protect. So if you get Protect, you get into optics together, which is usually how people buy the technology. You get all of these capabilities as one. And so you'll start to see, both of these features sets, if you will, being tightly intertwined, so that you really won't be able to even recognize the difference between the two functionality. All right, how do you make the scripts available? So just, you can go through your support. If you're a customer already, just go through support and request to be a part of the early adopter program for optics and new experimental scripts. And you should be able to go through your support portal and do that rather directly. If not, you hit us up, all three of us, four of us on the phone here, and we'll make sure you get access. You can send it to our emails, which is first letter of first name and last name @cylance.com.
Awesome, thanks. I appreciate it. And I did see one more question maybe popped in.
Yes, is there a best practice standard to help Cylance customers configure their system with the appropriate settings to prevent these attacks? Yes, there is. We have documentation that will walk you through best practices around configuration, but we also have a service called Threat Zero. And our Threat Zero service will come in and understand your organization, your needs, your IT needs, and then make sure that the recommendations are made for the configurations and the implementation of the configurations are made. And we work with customers to deliver on that day-to-day and hand-to-hand combat, so to speak, to make sure that everything's configured properly. So either way, you can either connect up again with support, with your sales reps, if you're aware of them, and if neither of those work, just send it straight into us and we'll get you connected.
And I'll be talking, when we do this again here in 2 weeks, we show our product versus these hacks, I will be showing you how they are configured to prevent these things from happening.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, thanks again, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for participating on the phone. Hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we'll see you in RSA.